Yeah. All right, good evening and welcome to the City of Sunbury Council meeting. It is November 2nd, 2022. It's 7:30 p.m. Would you please join me in a moment of silent prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance? Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Powell, roll call, please.
Mayor St. John,
Here.
Mr. Neff,
Here.
Mr. Grumney, here. Mrs. Cooper,
Here.
Mr. Martin,
Here.
Mr. Cackle,
Here.
Mr. Ghost,
Here.
all are present.
All right, great. We do have a public hearing tonight for the Sunbury Commerce Park. Before we open that public hearing, I think we need a motion of support to Mr. Green. Could you fill in the details?
We received an email communication yesterday. David Fisher, attorney and advocate for the applicants, was diagnosed with COVID yesterday. His doctor is telling them, even though that he is vaccinated, boosted, all those things, that he needs to quarantine for 5 days. Our really only option were delay the public hearing, which would have inconvenienced everybody, to allow him to attend by Zoom. So the court, and you, in this case, you all, the court, you have the discretion to do that. He can go ahead and present by Zoom. We'll be able to see him. We'll be able to talk to him, as if he were here. And that way we can go ahead with hearing tonight and not have to delay it and have everybody come back another night. So with that, I'd like to motion and a vote to allow Mr. David Fisher, the attorney for the applicant, due to health conditions, to be able to attend tonight's meeting and the public hearing and testify via Zoom.
Make that motion.
Got a motion by Councilwoman Cooper. Second by Councilman Martin. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Cackle,
Yes.
Mr. Ghost,
Yes.
Mayor St. John,
Yes.
Mr. Neff,
Yes.
Mr. Grumney,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
and Mr. Martin.
Yes.
7 yeas, and I will admit Mr. Fisher.
Mr. Bream, is there any further action we need to do to open the public hearing?
Once we have Mr. Fisher in attendance and we can acknowledge his attendance, we're going to need to do a swearing in, and that will be the next step.
Good evening, Mr. Fisher. Can you hear us?
I can, thank you.
Good deal. Technology. All right.
Mr. Fisher, this is David Bream, Law Director. We did a motion and a vote to allow you to attend virtually. Hope you're feeling up to this. But with that, we're going to go ahead and start the public hearing. So this is a public hearing. We have a court reporter who's going to take testimony. You're required to be sworn to testify. So we are going to swear people tonight. A couple things about a public hearing. Some of you may have attended a prior public hearing at the zoning commission meeting. This will be similar to that. You're going to be asked to come up to the podium to testify. You'll be asked to use the microphone. You're asked to state your name and address. It's important because the court reporter is taking this down, the stenographer, that one person talk at a time. As much as you may be tempted when something's said to want to blurt out, that's going to not enable her to get an accurate record. We want to get an accurate record of the testimony. So please refrain from trying to engage in dual conversations. There may be the opportunity for a give and take between the applicant or someone who's testifying. A question may be asked, somebody may go up to answer that question. We just need to do it one at a time once you get to the microphone. And we are also streaming this, so we want whatever's streamed to be in the microphone as well, so people that are viewing online can hear it. So with that, if you plan to testify tonight, or if you're even thinking about testifying tonight, we're going to ask you to stand and raise your right hand and be sworn by the court reporter. That includes Mr. Fisher. It doesn't require you to testify, but if you don't get sworn now, we'll have to stop and to swear you in just in case. So even if there's a chance, if you're here and there's a chance, please stand and raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you'll present will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, so we are going to start with the applicant presentation. Are there any exhibits that we'd like to enter prior to the applicant presenting?
Yes, I'd like to enter as exhibits to start what we know are exhibits that will be testified to. The complete binder with the rezoning application, I'd like to mark as Exhibit A for identification purposes. We also have the public hearing notice that will mark as Exhibit B. And there's a public hearing notice. I believe this is from our website, Steve.
Correct.
And this is the public hearing notice that was posted, will be Exhibit C. We do have there will be a slideshow presentation by the applicant. I believe it looks like this. If the applicant can verify that this is the front page. Gary
Smith.
Fisher's.
That is the presentation, yes.
We'll mark that as Exhibit D. We also have a red line version of some development text that was submitted. I'll mark as Exhibit E. There are some letters that were submitted by residents who were unable to attend tonight. Nazi, P-A-D-I-D-A-R is the last spelling. I'm not going to try to pronounce it because I probably won't get it right. Will be Exhibit F. Mike Rostick. Exhibit G. Eric and Judy Williamson. Exhibit H. Barry Bennett. Exhibit I. And there may be other things that are testified to. We can mark those as we get to them. That's what I have. Is there anything else that the applicant knows that will be exhibits tonight? We'll go ahead and floor is the applicants to present their presentation.
All right, we'll start. I believe Mr. David Fisher, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for the time to be with you tonight. I apologize. I did come down with COVID-19 on Monday and I'm in quarantine right now. So I appreciate your accommodation by letting me attend this hearing virtually through this Zoom. Look forward to working with the council and its representatives and the citizens tonight as we work through this project. I have with me tonight members of our team, and I'd ask them to raise their hands as I call their name and identify them. I've got Jim Olin representing Vince Romanelli as an applicant from the multi-family portion of the project. I've got Dana Donnell representing the MPA commercial property as an applicant for the commercial and retail portion of the project. And I've got Gary Smith of G2 Planning and Land Planner for the project. So I will be asking primarily Gary, I'll call upon him from time to time tonight to assist me. And Gary, I'd also ask you from time to time if you could work with steep piles as necessary to get the proper slides up on the projector, since I don't have access to do so. So accommodate me by doing that. I'd like to start our presentation with some background about this project. As most of you know, Vince Romanelli and his longstanding commitment to high quality development in the city of Sunbury. He's almost single-handedly responsible for all the development around State Route 3 and 3637, bringing Sunbury Mill Shopping Center and its Kroger store to the city. He's worked tirelessly and in good faith over many years to help Sunbury grow and prosper through high-quality development. He has never, ever refused to work with the city when requested by making contributions to the city and its improvements, and most recently contributing $250,000 to the extension of Sunbury Meadows Drive several years ago at the request of the city when it was of no immediate benefit to him. To put it plainly, he does things because they are the right thing to do for the city of Sunbury. So as to the matter at hand, while we're in attendance tonight at this public hearing, this property is a part of the old Miller family farm that was rezoned back in 1993, almost 30 years ago, from its agricultural use. The portion of the property we're discussing tonight, at that time, back 30 years ago, was rezoned as planned industrial, or PID, under the city's zoning code. Over the years that followed, Mr. Miller and Mr. Romanelli sold off portions of the property that was zoned for industrial. And these last two pieces we're talking about tonight are the last remaining pieces after all those years. For years, Mr. Romanelli has tried to sell or develop this property with its industrial zoning without success. The same goes for the portion of the property owned by MPA, commercial property. So beginning back in 2015, now 7 years ago, Mr. Romanelli began meeting with the city to discuss changing the zoning on his portion of the property to a multifamily development. Throughout the years and through several city administrations, Mr. Romanelli and I have met with city officials and the Planning and Zoning Commission to discuss alternate zonings for Mr. Romanelli's portion of the property, focusing primarily on a potential multifamily project. During those discussions, it was requested of Mr. Romanelli that he reach out to the adjacent landowner to the north, NPA commercial property, to see if they would join in a rezoning effort in order to change the zoning on their parcel from an industrial classification to a zoning district that would permit the frontage along Granville Street to be developed as a commercial retail project near the front door of the city, I should say the center of the city, the square. Mr. Romanelli, at his sole cost and expense, engaged in discussions with MPA to accomplish this change in zoning, and the two parties jointly filed the rezoning application that we're now discussing this evening in October 2021, over a year ago. Since that time, the applicants and their consultants have been working with the city to arrive at a plan of zoning that would be a win-win for both the city and the applicants, and present a high-quality development to this area so close to downtown Sunbury. Throughout these many months, there have been numerous meetings to arrive at the plan of zoning you have before you tonight, a plan that was recommended to City Council for adoption recently by your Sunbury Planning and Zoning Commission. The request itself is for consideration to request a rezoning of approximately 13.22 acres south of West Granville Street and on both sides of Sunbury Meadows Drive from its current industrial zoning to a planned commercial district zoning to permit the development of a mixed-use project consisting of 40,000 square feet of commercial, restaurant, and retail buildings fronting on West Granville Street to be known as Sub-Area A, and 120 unit multifamily development and related amenities south of Sub-Area A on both sides of Sunbury Meadows Drive to be known as Sub-Area B. Gary, could we stop a minute and ask you to work with Steve to show those two sub-areas on the maps?
There you go.
Great, thank you. So once again, sub-area A being what will be known as the commercial property up on Granville Street, sub-area B being the property south of that on both sides of Sunbury Meadows Drive, proposed to be developed as a multifamily apartment project.
And just let this is David Bream, let the record reflect that on the screen now is page 1 of Exhibit D. Which one on page?
Yes, pull down. He's looking for a sub-area map. It's a very. One more, sorry.
And let the record reflect that I believe that is page 4 of Exhibit D.
Thank you. So once again, sub-area A is the commercial development in blue, fronting on Granville Street, and sub-area B is the purple, south of sub-area A on either side of Sunbury Meadows Drive. As I stated a moment ago, at the time of the original filing on this matter, back in October of 2021, sub-area B, the multifamily portion in purple, was originally proposed to have 135 apartment units. At the request of the city, that unit count was reduced to 120 units, and that 120 unit count is what was recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission recently to you for consideration.
One more. Okay.
Let the record reflect we are now on Exhibit D. Page 6.
Thank you. In the development text that you have before you, it's in your binders at tab 2, and Mr. Bream made reference to it a few minutes ago as an exhibit. You will note that the applicants for both sub-areas have agreed to develop high-quality buildings on their parcels. Additionally, sample architecture for sub-area B, the multifamily project, and its amenities are included in the application materials that are a part of Exhibit A, the zoning binder, for your review, and those would be in front of you. I believe those are at tab 19. Both applicants have agreed to construct their projects using high quality architecture and materials. And in the case of the multifamily project in particular, at a recent request from the city engineer, we added text that project would be built only using what are known as all natural materials, meaning no vinyl, which you might note is present in many other projects and developments around the city. In the case of commercial restaurant and retail buildings in sub-area A, while they're not fully designed, we have worked with the city engineers, CT consultants, to derive very strict architectural guidelines for the buildings that will be developed and constructed on that parcel. All of this being done to assure the city of Sunbury that the development occurring on sub-area A and sub-area B will be of the highest quality and something both the developers and the city of Sunbury can be proud of well into the future. As for the City of Sunbury Comprehensive Plan, in our development text, we have gone into a lot of detail about how the proposed development as a mixed-use development is generally in keeping with the spirit and intent of that Sunbury Comprehensive Plan. I'd be happy to go over that in more detail, but it is highly detailed in the development text that you have before you at tab 2 in your binders. With respect to the request that this property be rezoned to PCD zoning, subject to council agreeing to permit some divergences that we'll review in a few minutes, all of which have been agreed to and recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission, the proposed development of this property is in keeping with the standards of the planned commercial district of the city zoning code, city zoning code. All of that is further outlined and addressed once again in our tab 2 development text. An area that is always of importance to municipalities and their residents is a preservation of open space on property when it's developed. The proposed development of this property generally exceeds the city's open space requirement of 20%. In fact, it provides 32% open space, 12% more than required by code. But there is a minor divergence required in that regard that we'll discuss in just a moment. Next, we'll move to divergences. The city's planned commercial development zoning chapter permits the city to grant certain divergences from requirements of its zoning code. Looked at another way, in return for a planned zoning, the city and the applicant can work together to design a plan of zoning with many more limitations and restrictions than would be required under a zoning classification that was not in a planned district. In this case, the applicant is requesting 7 divergences to proceed, all of which have been reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission and included as a part of its recommendation to City Council. These divergences are listed and explained in detail on pages 10 through 14 of the development text in tab 2 of your zoning booklets you have before you. I will briefly describe each, and to the extent there are questions or we need further clarification, I'm more than happy to go into more detail. The first divergence is from the city's tree survey and tree replacement. And it is being requested because the property, first, is not heavily treed. Second, the developers have committed that every attempt will be made to preserve trees where they are currently situated. And lastly, many new trees will be planted throughout this development. The second divergence is a divergence required by subarea A, where the commercial restaurant and retail establishments will be situated. This is a screening divergence needed because it is anticipated that restaurants in subarea A may have outdoor patios and cannot meet the screening requirements of the city's code. The next divergences are a series of divergences that are required by subarea B for the multifamily project. And the required divergences because, first of all, apartment units will not be in areas over or above storerooms or offices. Second, 1-bedroom units will be less than 850 square feet as required by code, with the carriage house units over garages being 525 square feet and other 1-bedroom units being 800 square feet as opposed to 850 square feet. These are all marketplace sizes for comparable units around Central Ohio. Next is that certain units over garages will encroach in a proposed stormwater easement, but that encroachment is only on the decks on these units that are well above any need to do work within or maintain the stormwater easement area. And last, the code has an interesting requirement that no more than 4 units per building and requires that lots on which multifamily units are developed have 4,000 square feet per dwelling unit and no more than 14 two-story apartments per acre, none of which we can comply with for this development as is shown to you this evening. The next divergence is a parking divergence or series of divergences that are required to permit reduced parking in subarea A and to allow a reduced parking stall size. And lastly, permit the parking in the multifamily project to be reduced from 2 parking spaces per unit that your code requires to 1.8 parking spaces per unit, which I might add is a request made to us by the city and its engineer to reduce parking from 2 spaces to 1.85 spaces in order to help create more open green space on the project. The next divergence is an open space divergence, which is required because some of the open space is not 100 feet in width and is located within setbacks. So once again, we're well over on open space, but some of it isn't as wide as required by code, and some of it is within setbacks. The next divergences are setback divergences that are required because of certain currently platted setbacks that we need to allow the property to comply to move forward. These include building setbacks, side yard setbacks, and rear yard setbacks, all of which were reviewed in detail with Planning and Zoning Commission and included in their recommendation to council. Last, there is a residential design standard divergence required to deal with the unit count per number of units per building that is at variance from what the code requires. Keeping in mind, this code is quite antiquated, and I believe the city's been working on it to update some of its standards on multifamily. So those would be the 7 divergences that have been requested and that have been approved and recommended by Planning and Zoning Commission to City Council for consideration tonight. In addition to the other textual requirements that you see in the development text that is in your packet, you'll note at the end of the development text that there are what we call other developer commitments, which are commitments that are now being made by the developer that in return for obtaining the rezoning, these are things that the developers commit to do. First of all is a $25,000 cash contribution to the city to provide funds for the extension of a multi-use trail. That trail was depicted initially by the city's engineer and is attached to Exhibit A to the development text you'll see. Second is a commitment to, within sub-area A, to install curb cuts and parking along Granville Street. As you can see in the drawing before you on the screen, there are some parking areas that have been designed along West Granville Street to add additional parking up in that area. Kind of an urban design landscape for parking. Next, one of the interesting comments that came from the city engineer and we agreed with is that with respect to building setbacks from streetscapes, that we agree to a maximum setback for buildings in order to address contemporary land planning design parameters that have buildings sitting up close to streets as opposed to parking between buildings and streets. So we've committed to make those maximum setbacks so the buildings front streets, parking doesn't front streets. And then lastly, as I discussed earlier in my presentation, the architecture for both sub-areas is specified in detail there on the last few pages of our development text to give the city assurance that all architecture and design will be of a high quality design. A few final notes. One of the items of concern to the city and the administration throughout this process has been appropriate screening for this development along its southern boundary adjacent to the single family homes. The applicants have endeavored to work with the city and the impacted residents to provide acceptable setbacks and screening. And in Mr. Smith's review a few minutes from now in the development plan, I'm going to ask him to share those plans for screening, including some illustrations he recently provided to the city, which I believe Mr. Bream referred to as exhibits a few minutes ago, that will depict this screening more clearly and show the efforts the developer is willing to expend in order to provide very hefty buffering and screening between this project and the residents to the south. So with that, I'd like to turn this presentation over to Gary Smith for a brief review of the development plan and the landscaping buffers and other items of note he would like to bring to your attention this evening.
Thanks, David. Gary Smith, 720 East Broad Street, Columbus, Ohio, with G2 Planning and Design.
And we are the land planner and landscape architect for the development, and here to represent Roman Melanie Hughes as well. If you could roll that back, to that one. So as David mentioned, this is essentially where we started. And kind of working through that process, one of the big issues that came up was the concern over kind of screening the residents to the south. And so what you can see the difference here is not only we had 135 units on this plan, we had the buildings arranged a little bit differently. So when you scroll back to that plan, what you'll notice is that the building arrangement has changed. We actually pulled the buildings further away from the neighbors. So we increased that setback to 50 feet for all of the buildings, and then increased the setback to the parking areas to 25 feet. One of the things that allowed us to do in kind of working through some of these issues was to dramatically increase the amount of landscaping and buffering along that entire boundary. So one of the things, I had a conversation with some of the neighbors, and one of the things that we agreed to do out of that was to, within that buffer area, install a 4-foot mound, and then do a 6-foot privacy fence along the top of that mound down the center, which would provide immediate screening. And then on both sides of that fence, populate that then again with additional evergreen trees, ornamental trees, and deciduous trees to provide kind of a variety of plant materials that would grow in and then further screen and soften that view. So the buffer that you see here, and actually you could scroll down to the landscape plan. Here you can see kind of the increased setback, but if you roll down a couple more. So this is the overall landscape plan, and this really just shows the kind of landscaping intent for the overall development, not only in terms of screening on the south side, but in terms of the landscaping in the commercial area, the landscaping in the apartments, and that buffer to the south. And if you roll one more, this is a little bit more enlarged picture of that landscape plan for the apartments and the buffer. And I was schooled on this. I'm going to use this TV, and then I'll go back to that TV and show where that is.
You mind grabbing the microphone?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm sorry.
And let the record reflect, I think you're testifying to page 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's the landscape plan and enlargement, correct?
That is correct.
So that's page 9.
There are a couple of landscape plan enlargements. This is the plan itself. Okay. So it's a little hard to see, and you might be able to see it in your packet, but that fence really kind of wraps this corner, and it goes right down the center of that buffer space right here. And it ties in ultimately over here to the decorative fence and the landscape feature. And then the same thing happens on the opposite side, where it ties in, and then it continues along the entire southern boundary on the east side of the development. And then you can see on both sides of that, this buffer is actually slightly more populated than the buffer that we had at Planning Commission. One of the requests that we got was to pay a little bit more attention to that buffer. So we actually went in and just crammed it full of all of the trees that we could fit without overcrowding. So we've gotten a pretty full slate of trees on both sides of that landscape buffer. And for the folks in the back, I'll run through that again. So the fence is right down the middle here along the top of that mound. That will help provide some immediate screening here. And then landscape material, both evergreen and ornamental trees. What we really wanted was a mix, a variety to create some interest so that we have some flowering in the spring, we have some fall color, and we have, the benefit of the evergreen screen as well, so that it didn't just look like, one solid wall of green. If you roll to, let me just one more thing on this before I get to that next buffer slide. From an amenity standpoint, David might have touched on it a little bit, but you can see in here the location of the clubhouse and the pool. And then another amenity that is included in this are the bocce courts along the east side for the residents as well. And then there's really a courtyard on the west side that is really more of a kind of a sitting garden contemplative space. If you'll roll to the next one. So we had early on, we had an artist an architectural artist do a perspective as if they were standing in the backyard of the neighbors to the south and looking out at the project in turn and at the buffer. And so you can kind of see in between the layers there, the fence and the mound as it is in the background. And then ultimately, all of the plant material as it grows, what that screen will look like. And there's one more slide that's just a little bit further down, trying to do a perspective of most of the buffer so that everybody can kind of get an idea of what the intent is, what we're trying to accomplish. If you'll roll on to the next one. This is just an enlargement of the clubhouse and the pool and the extensive landscaping around the clubhouse and the pool. Also the entry features, the landscaping, and if you roll one more, you'll get the more of the Sunbury Meadows Drive landscaping with the rail fencing and landscaping at different intervals, and where you have penetrations by the sidewalk and the street trees and the columns that will be the entry feature. And then you've got the amenity space of the bocce court. And then if you roll one more, you get an idea ultimately of what Mr. Romanelli is contemplating in terms of the signage, trying to keep it very classical, ornate columns with light fixtures on top, masonry columns combined with the three rail fence along the front end there. And I think, yep, last one really is the architecture that we have included in the package. And so the top one is ultimately a view of the a typical larger building, the multifamily building. And then there was a lot of people were kind of trying to figure out what those carriage units would look like over top of the garage. So the middle one is really what the carriage units will look like. And then the bottom view is the clubhouse itself, both the side view and the front view, what that will ultimately look like from Sunbury Parkway. And then I think that's it. I think the only other slide I have was just some excerpts from MORPC. We have that in there for the Planning Commission. I can go over that in more detail with you if you want, but I think probably everybody in the council is pretty familiar with MORPC's work and their recent growth study and the need for a diversity of different types of housing. So with that, I'll turn it back over to David and I'll be here to answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Gary. In conclusion, with respect to the architecture that Gary just mentioned a minute ago, I know Mr. Romanelli has pointed out to many of you that a good example of the kind of multifamily project he builds with the amenity features, et cetera, is down in Westerville across from the Giant Eagle on North State Street. I think many of you have gone down and looked at that property or toured that property. That is a very good example of the quality of building and architecture that Mr. Romanelli would anticipate using on this project. So with that, Mayor and members of council, we will close our presentation at this point in time and look forward to comments from the audience and questions and comments from administration and council members as we work through this process tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Thank you, Mr. Smith. All right, we are closing the that's public hearing. We are closing the applicant's presentation. We are moving on to the public comment portion. We are going to keep this to 3 minutes for each participant. We've got Steve over here with fancy technology called hand signals.
30 seconds, 20 seconds, 10 seconds.
Yeah. So I know there were some questions from the last public hearing around potential disparate treatment. We want to make sure everybody's treated fairly. And want to be respectful of everybody's time. Please be respectful. You may not agree with what folks are saying, but please listen. And it's very important that we do that. So I assure you that City Council will be listening to every one of you. So with that said, I think we're ready to kick this off. And if you were sworn in and you'd like to speak first, please come up to the microphone, state your name, spell your name, and state your address, please. And then we'll start the timer. First up.
My name is Dana Donnell. I'm the owner of NPA Commercial Property. I never had a chance to really address the residents or the council or the zoning council either on what my heart is and my intention with this development. It's my desire to create a gathering place, not only in retail space, but a gathering place with respect to restaurant. In my vision and my desire is, if you've ever been up to Henmix, it's just a lovely community gathering spot. You could get a beer, talk, enjoy some outdoor fire, something like that. It would be very difficult for me to move forward, or the feasibility of that kind of a project would be difficult.
Can we pause the time, please? We're starting off on the wrong foot. Can we please keep the commentary down? Please be respectful. Thank you. Let's get off on the right foot. Let's start over. Thank you.
It would be difficult for me with respect to the feasibility of it, just like sheer finances, if the density was lacking in people with respect to the apartments. That's why we think it's a lovely package. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker. If you can state your name and spell your name, please. Come on up.
Hi, my name is John Durilla. I am at, last name is Dzurilla, and I am at 1398 Sunbury Meadows. I find it interesting that Mr. Romanelli claims the responsibility for extending Sunbury Meadows Drive when there's no benefit for him, but now there is. Was this done in preparation for this project? Sunbury, in my opinion, does not have the infrastructure that can handle this kind of a project. We need to think about the school buses. They have staggered start times right now. The police, fire, EMS, the traffic up and down Sunbury Meadows is very heavy, and cars go up there pretty fast, and the residents are always trying to watch out for each other and for children. The other thing I was thinking about is why so many variances and 7 divergences. Zoning codes are put in place to protect the city, the residents, and property values. Are all of these, is that what's really best for the city in this case for this project? Or is this being done just to accommodate the generosity of Mr. Romanelli to the city of Sunbury? That's all I have. Thank you. Please make the right decision.
Thank you. All right, next speaker. Come on up.
Yes, my name is Gary Gershkin, it's RISKA. I live at 1338 Sunbury Meadows Drive. I have no doubt that this community that they're going to play in will be beautiful. It'll look nice. The thing that's concerning me is not the Section A, but Section B. When you have residential areas such as apartments, that's going to bring too many people to support, that our school system they can't support. My wife's a teacher. They cannot have good subs with their current pay to even cover the schools. Another thing is the crime. My professional experience shows that people that do not get mortgages have a lot of cash, rent. New Albany, I know DTU, Delaware Tax, they have hit that residents in Westerville multiple times for narcotics warrants and others. That's all I have to say. I think it's a bad fit for us because of the apartments. The apartments are bad. They're not invested in the community. They're here renting. That's all I really have to say.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Julie Ahrens, last name is spelled Arens, and I live at 1163 Sunbury Meadows Drive. In 2016, the village of Sunbury, which we now refer to as, well, we are now a city of Sunbury, revised the village of Sunbury Comprehensive Plan, otherwise known as the city's master plan. In section 1 of this plan, it states, the intent of modern planning practice is to plan for the future. It is intended to be a vision of the future development of Sunbury. It is a guide, not a strict set of rules. Growth is dynamic, and a plan must be dynamic. Development trends, economic markets, and community priorities will change over time. Along with those changes, the plan must also amend with regular updates so that it can generally and correctly reflect the values and goals of the community. The purpose of a master plan is to ensure that the city develops in a balanced manner, while the city also remains functional and sustainable as a whole. A master plan serves as a roadmap to promote growth while guiding and regulating both present and future development in our city. We have a master plan. If what the council seeks is to alter the master plan, then let's take the time to rethink that plan as a whole. Let's take the time to think through the ripple effect of each change. Let's move the goalpost and adjust course. The zoning change proposed here is not that. It's nothing more than far-sighted piecemealing with an immeasurable contagion effect. 6 years ago, a comprehensive plan steering committee, along with the planning and zoning committee, worked diligently to update a plan to not only meet Sunbury's immediate needs, but also forecast the needs of Sunbury for the years to come. They created a plan for growth because growth is necessary. And most importantly, planned growth is responsible. Master plans are created so that residents don't have to stand up here during council meetings and defend their right to keep their town small. When that is what they've moved into, all the while trying to make sense of what is essentially a foreign language. Because ultimately, that's what we're doing right now. All of us are spending countless hours of our free time Googling and researching and reaching out to friends and family members with the knowledge of real estate and zoning and master planning and trying to make sense of these proposed plans. This isn't a language we speak, but you know who does? Mr. Romanelli. Not speaking the language in some ways diminishes our voice because so many of us are unsure how to even get up here and say anything because they don't speak the language. All they know is their beautiful small town is currently in danger of growing in a way that wasn't planned. Those of us who are up here speaking to you tonight have spent hours and hours and hours researching our rights and discussing the formulation of a PAC because a developer who purchased a plot of land over 20 years ago, knowing that it was zoned for industrial use, has decided we should be deemed worthy of coloring outside the lines laid out in our master plan. Before I conclude, I do want to address one thing that has been raised numerous times. That is the perceived irony of Sunbury residents living in new construction homes up in arms.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Ms.
I'd
Ahrens.
count it down.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Ms. Ahrens. It's,
That's okay. Totally fine.
thank you.
Totally fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker. Steve, are you giving hand signals?
I did,
Okay.
but I'll
I just didn't look.
I'll
That's
give
okay.
I'll give a verbal 0 if that's.
Thank you. No.
Hi, Nicole Walker, Walker. And I'm actually down at 6023 Red Bank Road, Galena, but I pay attention really closely to all of Big Walnut community because I really truly believe that's how we should be seeing all of the growth in our area is as a Big Walnut community. My kids go in the district and whether you feel that way or not, you are responsible for making sure that we're taking care of the students now, not just trying to throw the students into the school and saying, oh, they'll figure it out. Every time I have to stand up here and kind of beg and plead for, you know, the elected officials to protect the desires of the community, I'm always just a little bit blown away because, you know, we all live here. We moved here for a reason. I feel like the majority of us moved here to enjoy the rural feel. And I heard at least once urban community, which does not fit here in Sunbury. We have the master plan and zoning codes put in place for a reason. We really don't have room to budge on them. You will single-handedly ruin the area that quickly because there are already 744 units being proposed over at 3637. There's 300 and something acres for sale that is being marketed directly for Intel over in, I think it's Harlem. There's multiple plots all over the place that are getting ready to just be pummeled. Let's see. But I guess if you don't think that we're on doorstep of, you know, Intel hell, I just think everybody's in denial. I think we need to be very careful about how we move forward with what we're about to do. I wrote a couple things down because I guess in my mind is it, if you feel like you have to bend just because he owns the land already, I just feel like that's a complete lie. You know, if I was farming 100 acres and then I just decided I want to do erect apartments on it, that's just not the way it works. I have to come through the proper channels and jump through all the hoops. So I think, you know, we are the desirable area. You need to be making the developers jump through every single hoop. And the Sunbury residents are waking up. I encourage you guys to talk to your neighbors. There's talk about a PAC. There's talk about a referendum if it's necessary. And I just feel like we need to be careful here. We need about half of that. And I've been to Henmix, big fan of Henmix. Nothing like Henmix at all. There's definitely not even close to the parking that's going to be needed. So let's see if I wrote anything else down that I'm missing. I guess if you're for this project, I mean, I would just encourage you to go to an urban area. We don't want to be Dublin. We don't want to be New Albany. You know, I don't feel like every surface of America has to be covered like Dublin does. You know, why does Columbus just keep getting pushed further and further out? How fair is that for developers to come in here and pack as many apartments as they possibly can on the littlest plot of land and drive out parking? I mean, there's nowhere to park. You're going to put more parking in front of Anthony Dental. Like it literally doesn't make sense. So anyway.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Thank you. Next speaker.
Tony Morgan at 1328 Sunbury Meadows Drive, last name spelled Morgan. Similar to some other comments, I'm for the retail restaurant area. I think that's what could be a good addition, but the apartment area is what I'm not in favor. I think a lot of questions and concerns have come up around infrastructure, whether that's school buses and schooling, if it's traffic or parking, even potentially power. We've seen some issues with power recently as well. We're adding a high density area. From my perspective, I'm sure it would be a high quality build and the apartments would be nice, and it's probably also a good business decision, but from a community standpoint, being that close to the square, I think there's better opportunities for that space. Mentioning Henmix is the idea of it being an open place to gather, have some space that people can go to, enjoy. That's not, just a high density area with, parking and, parking lots. So, just for consideration on the infrastructure and the impact of what, high density housing looks like that close to kind of one of the main areas that, Sunbury cherishes with the square. And how can we improve that and, bring kind of a bigger impact to the community that's not just financial. And that's all I have.
Thank you. All right, next speaker.
Eric Williamson, ERIKWILLIAMSON, 2362 Common Bend Drive. And I just wanted to express my opposition to it. It's just far too dense for the amount of property and the variance is required. And from a personal perspective, it literally comes up to my backyard. It's only like 15 feet from my patio. So also my neighbor, John McCown, MCKOWN, also contracted COVID. He's a 2392 common vent, and he also asked me to express his opposition to the project. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Pamela Herbster. That's HARPSTER. I live at 2357 Common Vent Drive. Not too long ago, it's been a while, I sat on a committee where we tried to figure out what we were going to do with the overpopulation with the old high school. And I truly thought that we had come to a good place, but now all of a sudden I see a shortage of teachers, I see a shortage of school bus drivers, and I see our children suffering. I know one of the big reasons I moved to this community was because I wanted to give my children an amazing school experience, and I've been very blessed that they have that. My big concern with these units is with our system already being stressed like it currently is. What is this going to do to our children? Are we being responsible? Are we doing due diligence in protecting the interest of our children if we approve this?
Thank you. Next speaker.
My name is Jeff Rogan. I'm at 1263 Sunbury Meadows Drive.
What's the last name? I'm sorry, I didn't catch your last name.
Jeff Rogan, GROGAN.
Okay, thank you.
1263 Sunbury Meadows Drive. I just wanted to voice my opposition to this project. Among the other things that have already been stated, I just wanted to reiterate the fact that I'm very concerned about the traffic that will be added to the street. I live right on Sunbury Meadows Drive. Like I've said, cars fly up and down the street, and the traffic has just been increasing since the 3 years that I've moved in, and this will only add to it. I would also like to reiterate on the impact this will have on our already overwhelmed school system. We're having a hard time getting teachers. My son's teacher is currently out on maternity leave, and they haven't even been able to get a long-term sub. So they've had the listing out there for months knowing about this, but we can't even get teachers to fill in for teachers that we already have. So I just do not think this is a good idea to add this many vehicles and new people to the community.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello, I'm Ariel Jarrell. It's ARIELLEJARRELL. I'm at 444 Lemming Drive, and I would like to just voice my opposition to this project for the reasons that were already mentioned. I am concerned for my children and all the children around the block in our neighborhood. The traffic is already a huge concern with our kids out playing and how fast those cars are coming down, especially Sunbury Meadows Drive. And I'm also concerned about the impact it will have on our schools.
Thank you very much. Next speaker. Come on up.
Hello, Krista Juskiw, JUSKIW, 869 Peacock Drive. I too oppose this situation because of all the same reasons that my neighbors have as well. We have an above average school district as it is right now. I would hate to see that go down for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Come on up.
Hello, I'm Brian Harbster, 2357 Common Vent Drive, HARPSTERBRIAN, by the way. I'm not necessarily opposed to this. I mean, something's going to happen back there, whether it be apartments or another speed shop that we already have behind where we live. But something's going to happen back there. So my question to you or Romanelli is what's going to happen with the street, as we've already talked about with the traffic coming down Sunbury Meadows. Are we getting a traffic light down there? I know coming out right now, I'm trying to teach my son how to drive, how to take a left onto that street going to the high school. As he's a junior right now, we had a kid that just graduated. As Pam said, we moved to this neighborhood. I actually lived in Big Walnut since I was 4. Seen a lot of growth going on, and I can't say it's out of control, but this idea is, what is the plan for that intersection? Who's paying for that? Do we have to have a high school kid get wiped out at the corner before we put a traffic light in? Who's going to take that safety upon their hands? Will it be Romanelli? Will it be you guys that vote that in? How do we make sure that our kids are protected in that intersection? How do we make sure that our traffic is controlled through that area? We're already becoming in our neighborhood a bit of a cut through. I mean, I was 16. I found all the streets to cut through when I was 16. And man, I went 45, 50 miles an hour down 25-mile-an-hour streets. That's what people do. I'm not going to sit here and try to pretend like, I can't believe they're doing it. I did it myself. So how do we protect that from happening to us? How do we stop that traffic from happening? How do we prevent the stupid things that we all did that we're all kind of worried about, but not really talking about? How do we prevent that from happening in this neighborhood? Big Walnut's been an awesome place to live. I've lived here. I'm 52 now. I've been here since I was 5 years old. Did go to St. Paul to sales though, because Big Walnut wasn't a great school at the time. But looking now, as we got to the point where we're having kids, I was more concerned with community and safety than anything else, and that's why we came back to Big Walnut, and that's why we've been here. We do live there. We live that place now. Yeah, it was a new build. I can't sit there and talk about the evils of development. It's not bad at all, but it needs to be controlled, and there needs to be a thought process about the traffic control and what we're going to do with all that. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker. All right. Hello.
Hi, my name is Jamie Novak, Novak. I live at 768 Peacock Drive. I moved to Peacock Drive in July from North Star community because I like Sunbury a lot, mostly because it's not Hannah, Westerville, downtown, Dublin. It's really it's that really urban, not suburban feel that's so attractive about this community, and it's the only reason I stay. That and the school district. I have a grandson that's 11 that lives with me, and on Peacock Drive, the traffic is crazy for people cutting through now to get down to Sunbury Meadows and do sort of a back cut. So I'm concerned about the traffic flow, just like my neighbors. I'm also concerned about the school system. He is like, the buses are late, it's just a struggle right now. And one of the most attractive things about this community is the school district. So if we put it at risk with too much density, then we're also putting the popularity of Sunbury at risk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Kathy Lehner. It's Lehner, and I really hate speaking in front of a crowd, so I'll be really brief. This has come to my attention. I live at 118 North Street. So in a way, I'm kind of in what I consider the old village. We do business from the antique mall on the square. So I would have extreme concerns about this density of housing and the traffic problems it's going to be creating, not only for the residents that have already spoken, but we're seeing cut-throughs across the square, and we've seen some pretty hazardous situations occurring with that. It's already really difficult from the square clear over to Route 3. It's just gotten worse and worse. I raised my children here as well. They all graduated from Big Walnut. We lived outside of Galena. And part of the reason we moved here 20-some years ago was because we very much enjoyed that small town, can't say village anymore, but that small town atmosphere. The retail section, if done properly, I could see happening if it's done tastefully and properly, but I would rather see some of that land used for public use and not that kind of a high density residential situation. Thanks. Got through that without.
Thank you.
Next speaker. Ladies first.
Better go now or I'll lose my nerve to do it. I'm Kristen Adams, ADAMS, and I live at 309 Lemming Drive. I wanted to express my opposition to this development, and I moved here. I have 4 young kids. They were actually with me out in the hall earlier. Good thing they went home. It would be chaos at this late hour, but I do think that I represent a good swath of the community that lives in the development that would border this new proposal. I have very young kids. One of them is in a cast right now. He plays hard, as young kids do, and I have seen the traffic and the speed of cars coming down Sunbury Meadows. And that's the only inlet to this new development coming from either Granville or Sunbury Meadows off of 3. And I'm really, really concerned that adding the cars that would come with 120 new apartments, likely they would have more than 1 car, despite the parking variance that was mentioned tonight. I'm extremely concerned about the influx of cars in terms of infrastructure, the damage, the wear and tear on our roads, but especially for speeding and kids in the neighborhood that's already here. And I'm concerned. When we selected this house, we knew that this was zoned industrial because we knew what that meant, that we weren't going to have high density housing in that space. And so it seems incredibly unfair to the residents already here investing in Sunbury that we're going to have the carpet ripped out from under us, really for the bottom line for Romanelli, who also knew that it was zoned industrial, to somehow build apartments now. We'd love to see growth in Sunbury. We'd love to see the Part A development, but not the Part B that comes with that, because it totally changes the feel of our neighborhood, which is where we came to raise a family and put down roots. So I just wanted to express my opposition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker. All right, so Barry Bennett, come on up. Yeah.
Good evening, Barry Bennett. I live at 5401 Plantation Road. I own the building across Granville from this development at 130 Burger Drive. Obviously, my home is not involved in this. It's 5 miles away, but my building is. So I do not favor this rezoning for the reasons I stated at the zoning meeting. And I'm going to sum that up here, I hope. I'm hoping that council will either disallow this or at least pause until the next meeting to consider what has been and may be presented here tonight, and also review what was brought up at the zoning meeting last month. Going to an immediate vote does not allow much time for any governing body to consider what has just been presented. So I've got high hopes that council will allow the time necessary to review in depth each specific point raised by the residents of Sunbury, both at that previous meeting and tonight. I have a note here, which I'll come back to. My position was and remains that this is not the correct location for this type or really any type of high density residential development. In the interest of time, I presented council, each member, with my written detailed notes from the zoning meeting, which I believe is Exhibit I. At any rate, you each got a copy now. There are many uses of this land that, in my opinion, would benefit Sunbury far better than apartments, with the accompanying heavy increase in automobile traffic at this location. I firmly believe that with the best interests of Sunbury in mind, this plan could be abandoned in favor of something that's more in tune with Sunbury's needs. Possibly a miniature version of the outlet mall. Retirement housing was mentioned at the zoning meeting, an open park or events venue, or some mix of all of that. I'm not against apartments, I'm just against them here, and I have no problem with the commercial planned along Granville. There should be more to this equation than profits to the developer and the tax base to the city. On a related but separate note, our code presently allows for apartments to be located above the future proposed retail area along Granville. It was stated by the Romanelli spokesperson at the zoning meeting that this would not occur. I'm going to request that this be put into writing somehow so there's no ambiguity about it now or in the future. I'm also uncertain as to whether, well, I put this in before NPA was here tonight. I was uncertain as to whether or not they speak in a legal capacity for NPA, because that would apply to that strip along Granville. Additionally, on this topic, there seems to be no guarantee that the included property along Granville would be used for shops and restaurants. I know it's shown on the drawing, but that area being zoned as they want to zone it now could be apartments in the future if the commercial plans fall through. So I'd like to see some guarantee that that would not happen. I've handed out you all the copy. I'm assuming I'm about out of time. So thank you. And if anybody wants a copy of this, I have some.
Thank you, Mr. Ben. Love your shirt.
Thank you.
Right, next speaker.
My name is Judy Williamson, Williamson. I just wanted to, the 2362 Common Bent Drive. I just wanted to reiterate from the letter I sent to all of you on the council and the mayor, our opposition or my opposition to this proposed development. High density housing does not fit Sunbury. That's not what we moved here for. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak this evening? We got Mr. Bill Shelby.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Come on up. Yes, sir.
My name's Doug Lindbergh. I live at 70 Rainbow Avenue, I'm a lifelong resident. Born and raised here. The area on the corner that we're talking about, just above Prairie Run. We're talking about 5 acres of property that was basically pasture field back in the day when Paul Miller and his family were farming it. To put 120 homes or residences stacked on top of it with professional businesses in front. I don't think that would be the best for our interests. I would think that we would want to see more commerce, such as healthcare, doctors, and people going in that professional area there where we can actually go in and take care of our residents in that area. If we add more people in a high density section, we're talking 120 homes or 120 residents in a section there, and then put restaurants and so on and so forth. I don't see where that would benefit us. So that's where I'm at. And I think most of us want to keep the small town feeling. As I have always thought, I've watched this town explode through my 60 years of life here. And I'd like to see that little section be more commerce, where we can take care of our families and our families' well-being, rather than just stack stuff in it just to make money, just for somebody else to make money. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker. We need to get a raise hand how many folks are left that do wish to speak. So we got 1. I saw Bill Shelby. 2, 3. I think that's about it. Okay. All right. Whoever would like to go next. Got 3. No. All right, there we go. Hey, come on up. You stood up first. I cannot. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. We can. Dave, Breen, can I get a recommendation? I'm sure we could allow exceptions, but I just would like to go through.
Yeah, you're the chair of the meeting. It's up to you. 3 minutes a participant. If you want to allow somebody to come up and add, the applicant's going to come back up as well. As long as it doesn't get too out of hand. It's 8:45, so.
That can open up the potential that we're gonna have everybody come up and speak
I
again.
think I would
Is that
have
what we're gonna
everybody
do that?
who get everybody to speak first once
There
who
we go.
hasn't spoken.
Okay.
Start with that.
All right, if you haven't spoken, you mind coming up, then we'll open it up again. And this is new to me, but I appreciate the recommendation from our legal counsel. All right, come on up. Oops.
Hi, I'm Nazi Padidar, Padidar. I already emailed everyone here, I believe, in the council. So you have all of that. I just wanted to say I'm opposed to the apartments being built there. There's so much more you could do with that piece of land. All my neighbors are already concerned, mentioned, how they're concerned. We're all concerned. I do have a granddaughter that comes over and I babysit. And we go out and play, and I don't want all of that. This is too much traffic, not enough room in that street for all those cars to come through and speeding through. I don't think it's safe. We're taxpayers, and I believe when renters come in to rent, doesn't matter what kind of apartment it is, luxury or not, they're renters. They just come for a certain period of time and they leave. So to me, they don't really care. I'm sure everybody, all of us pretty much at one point in our life lived in apartments. So, okay, it's good for as long as you're there, but it's not yours. So you don't really care for the place you live in or the community that you live in because it's temporary. So that's all I wanted to say. Okay, thank you.
Next speaker. Last call of first time speakers. Nobody else? You're waiting? Yeah.
I like to be last, please.
Well, but you and Bill Shelby are in a standoff on who's going last, so.
That's why
Right. All right. Okay. There we go. Hello.
My name is Jerry Kachia.
My
name is Jerry Kachia. That's name is spelled COCCIA. Live at 2292 Common Bridge Drive. I just want to agree with most of the people here, but my point is the council's responsibility is to the current citizens and not the future residents that will only be here for a short time and will not be here through the issues that this development will bring. Those of us that are here for the long term will remember what the council decides and needs you to make the right decision. Move forward.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much.
My name is Larry Mead. I live at 2432 Commandant Drive. Can you put exhibit D up for me?
Yeah,
Is that possible?
Yes.
Pause the timer.
We're gonna pause the time until we get this up for you.
It's the one that shows the layout.
Right.
Yep, we're going.
Did you know what page you were? Or look at this?
Maybe just page one. I think I just want the site layout.
One.
Yeah, it's this one. First one here. Want the current plan or the old?
Yeah, the current one.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Also, I'm just going to save time. I agree with most of my neighbors here, so I won't go through all that information. But I did want to point out, I live 2432 is this location right here. The edge of my home is only about 40 to 50 feet to the property line. From there, from what I've been given, there's only another 50 to 60 feet to the front of this building. If you put that in perspective, that's less than 40 yards on a football field. And I brought this up at the last meeting for the folks over here. My home is here, from here to here, it's about 40 to 50 feet. From here to here, about 50 to 60 feet roughly. I brought this up the last meeting. My windows face the property that they're proposing. So I'm going to look out at that no matter what landscaping they put up. These buildings are about 35 feet high. So, okay, we got 4 feet, we got 6 feet, that's 10 feet. So unless they're going to build or install 40, 50 foot high trees, I'm 60 years old. For the next 10 to 15 years, I'm going to be looking at the top of those buildings. And as a lot of my neighbors said, I moved here for a smaller area. I live in Lewis Center. That place is exploding. That's why I left after 23 years. So to see apartments come in, 120 units in that small space, I've lived there 4 years. That is a lot of density into a small area. And I don't think that's what's going to be good for our area at this point. I don't understand. And I just took account of the 19 people that spoke so far. All 19 opposed this project. So I'm going, if you want to do the win-win, as I heard earlier, I would hope you would listen to the residents and come to some type of agreement where it doesn't have to be apartments. Why can't it be residential homes? That's the part I don't understand, and nobody will give me that answer other than we don't make enough money on those. So again, it comes back to dollars and cents. And I would hope, I know you guys are smart enough to know that there's more to life than just dollars and cents. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. And do we have one more final first round speaker?
I'm waiting for you.
Okay.
Oh, you're fine. I don't start until you get your name and address out.
Hello, my name is Bill Shelby. I live at 2262 Common Bent Drive. I gave to everybody a copy of what I get to look at on a regular basis out my back door, which is planned industrial. I am a proponent of the apartments. I've lived in the 43074 for 34 years. On 14 acres. Now I live in my current residence for 3 years in a development that's less than the size of what I lived. My background is I've been involved in development for 40 plus years. I've built 5 industrial parks, 4 office parks, 3 shopping centers, and 3 major downtown condos development projects. A rule of thumb that I learned at Ohio State University is never build an industrial next to residential. It's not a compatible use. When I found out that the property was not zoned as planned commercial, I was shocked. And that's what caused me to go out and take pictures. I've talked to some neighbors. A lot of them don't like to face Facebook hell if they oppose something. Dave Grinnell texted me. He's not going to come tonight. He's sick, but he feels the same way I feel. Master plan that I've seen in the past several years was focused on a walkable community. To have a walkable community, you have to have a high enough density to support the retail and to help propose and develop the downtown. Anytime you can upgrade zoning, it enhances your property value. Industrial is 60 to 70,000 per acre. It's a lower value and a lower tax base for the city and for the schools. Commercial, based on density and traffic count, is usually how you come up with the value. I ran some numbers a couple months ago that it was 200 to 250 per acre. It's a higher value, higher tax revenue. It's auto traffic. It's not truck traffic. Roads were not designed for industrial, and it is zoned industrial. And those pictures that you see are pictures of industrial in Sunbury, and those are not being held up to the standards and not might close. I guess I am. First round.
Thank you. All right, next. Is there a last speaker of the first round? Sir, you speaking? All right, I think in the second row.
Do I agree with what Bill said?
All right, if you want to come up and speak, could you speak into the microphone? State your name, please.
My name's Rick Storts, and that's STORTS. I live at 2277 Common Bend Drive. I have the misfortune of being right across the street from a business, which is in an industrial area called On 3. And it is not only, I think, an embarrassment to Sunbury for letting that business in there and then let them do whatever they want to do because they bought that big furniture store. I'm working on fixing that. But I think there's also some other embarrassing places in this area that might started out industrial because a lot of small towns start out somewhere. And it's not unusual to go from industrial to commercial to residential and that kind of path. I saw that living in Westerville for a short period of time. They did a good job of recovering from that. I'd hate to see something we don't need put into Sunbury for the right reason. I think that property, sub A and sub B, needs to be converted from industrial to commercial residential. But by saying that, I'm not saying that I think we need to do the project that is being considered, because in the last meeting that I attended, it sure seems like there's a lot of traffic you're adding to a odd part of town that doesn't look like it was designed for a lot of traffic. Just think about the intersection of Sunbury Meadows, Granville, the street over to behind the library. It's hard enough to move around now. I can't imagine what it would look like or be like if you added all of that traffic load, which is associated with all those apartments. I do have a couple of questions, and I don't know if they can be answered or not, but what is with all of the, what appear to be ponds on Sunbury Meadows on the east side of the road? There's a pond at the intersection of Yarrow and Sunbury Meadows, and then there's another pond, which I think is in one of these drawings. I don't understand why we're not have those ponds, because they attract geese and nobody does anything.
The timer went off. We're gonna pause it here, and I think we're gonna go for round two. And unless anyone on council is brave enough to say no to these residents. All right, we're going round two. This was not in the plan. I just want you to know. So come on up. We have the first taker.
First of all, thank you guys so much. I was a little nervous earlier, so I forgot a couple of things I wanted to.
No problem.
Yeah, Jamie Novak, interview AK, 768 Peacock Drive. One of the biggest questions that occurred to me, I'm in marketing and have been for almost 30 years for a large financial institution. When I looked at this plan, I was trying to figure out who's the target demographic to live in these. And what do we really have to support that target demographic? If you have one bedrooms, I look at the apartments crossing the Giant Eagle on Westville Road, right? There's a lot of commerce, it's close to a lot of businesses. So I can see why it makes sense to have apartments right there. But when you look here in some area, not residential and commercial, who are we really trying to attract into this location in those apartments? So that was one big question. And I want us to really think about that as we're looking at that section B going forward. I agree with everybody else here. I love the commercial idea. I mean, if there were more things within walking distance, I'm sure we'd all go to it. And that's a really large development. The second thing is if somebody wanted to put apartment buildings next to you, how would you feel about it? Thanks so much.
Thank you. All right, round two. Participant two, Barry Bennett, run up.
I've got all this list I didn't get to before. Barry Bennett, do you need the address and all again?
No.
Okay, I'll be pretty brief here. I want to just interject in here that Mr. Romanelli's spokesman, I'm sorry, I forgot his name. The assistant. Gary. Okay. At any rate, both last meeting and this meeting has spent a lot of time expounding on the virtues of Mr. Romanelli and his product. I don't think anybody has ever questioned any of that. That's not the issue here. So the other thing that kind of raised an eyebrow for me, and I think somebody else brought it up, was the amount of money that was spent on the road. And I think in my paper I passed out, I didn't get to it though. I don't think any of our safety services would have allowed that development as it exists right now to be built with just one entrance point. So there had to be a second road regardless. So I don't think I'm going to cry over that one. Mentioned they were unable to sell the land. They didn't try very hard because I was right there. I know there was a sign up for a while for the front part, but nothing for the back. It did pass through zoning. I just wanted to point out to anybody who wasn't there that it was a 4-2 vote. It was not unanimous. With respect to one of the recent speakers, industrial does not mean it has to be an asphalt factory. There's a lot of other industrial uses that could be there without making smoke or noise or being degraded over time. There's all kinds of things that could go in there. Whoever owns that property kind of has some control over who they lease it to, sell it to, or allowed to build on it. That doesn't seem to be a real problem for me. There was some note made again by one of the Romanelli personnel that there wasn't enough support for retail, or maybe it was just recently made here. I'm sorry, I don't remember. I have retail space all over Sunbury. I get calls every month, all month long, about people looking for space. So I say there's plenty of call for retail. And I think I will stop right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Next round. Tom, Julie, you want to come up?
Yeah, you know I. I don't know, that's why you're like, no, please. I'm just kidding. Okay, I'm Julie Ahrens. I live at 1163 Sunbury Meadows. Unfortunately for all of you, this is not very much. This one point keeps coming up, not necessarily from you guys, but just in the community when we talk about it. It's like, you guys are in a new development. Why, like, who are you to come in and now be like, hey, this is not, now you don't want any growth? But the reality is this: in 2016, when the master plan was revised, the land that would eventually become the communities at Sunbury was zoned as residential vacant to be developed into owner occupied housing at a later date. So our homes were part of that master plan. Our homes were part of the plan that allows for the city to grow and the schools to be funded. The plan that takes into account the need for tax funding that sustains the city. We were planned. What Mr. Romanelli is suggesting was not planned. And if what we want is to add something like this, like, I'm not against putting retail or anything like that in there. But when we start to piecemeal things together, it's like we have a puzzle and we've already decided this is what the puzzle looks like. And now all of a sudden you guys are like, we're going to cut these corners, or the proposal is to cut these corners, and then we're just going to like jam it in there. Well, now it's not going to be the picture of Sunbury anymore, because that's what the master plan is for. It's for what are we now and how are we going to grow so we continue to be sustainable, right? Because we have to take into account growth and funding and whatever else. So my proposal to you guys, or what I would like to see from you guys, is if this is something that we need to do, like, hey, let's take advantage of Intel coming in, hey, let's do whatever, then we need to go back to the drawing board and revise our master plan. So we're paying attention to the ripple effect of each of these changes, instead of just shoving this in here and then coming in here and shoving that in. If we take the time to paint a new picture, then maybe we all can get on board with that a little bit more, because it becomes what we have decided as a city we want to look like. This is just removing one piece and sticking something else in there. And I just don't think that that's what we're designed for. And we look to you guys to use that master plan as the guide to keep us moving forward, to make sure that the ripple effect is taken into consideration. That's it.
Thank you.
That's what I would say.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? All right, we're gonna go on to staff comments. Mr. Hall. I believe we have a staff write-up. Does anybody need a break?
I need to.
Okay, I do too. I didn't, yeah, can we, how do you want to do it? Are we gonna run out? I've read the report.
We're gonna take a recess. When will we reconvene? It is now by my clock, 9:06. When would you like to reconvene?
Let's gotta breathe for a minute and run downstairs and run.
So we convene at 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Let's do it. Motion to something? No, you just call recess. Use that power. Get started. I'm ready to do.
Jeez.
You're your game. You did that. All right, we're ready to go ahead and get started. We're going to go with the staff report. The staff report is going to be presented by Mr. Westfall.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome. All right, we're still in the public hearing now, and the recess is over. Thank you, Mr. Hall. Floor is yours.
During the Planning and Zoning Commission, we presented an extensive report, 15-page document that went through with planning and zoning. Every item of the development was reviewed. Since then, we've had the applicant address a few more issues in regards to building design standards for both the apartments and the commercial area and the clubhouse. Those have been addressed. Screening on the south side has been addressed. One remaining item outstanding, we're still reviewing the traffic situation. And as with most developments, that continues through development agreement stage. So that is still under review. We are also reviewing a regional traffic plan for the area, which would include everything around the Kroger site, the square, Sunbury Meadows Drive, Granville Street, et cetera. So we are under the process of doing a regional traffic review as well. From my standpoint, the comments have been addressed. Like I said, the traffic is still outstanding, and I will answer any questions.
A lot of meat in that document. Do you have any questions from council?
I do, Wes, with regard to traffic. I know most of the folks out here had a lot of comments about that and concerns.
Tim, can you state your name so the stenographer can get it down?
Yes, Tim Ghost, Council President. Again, back to traffic. Can you state for the record for some of the folks here, some control mitigation techniques that we've recently talked about? What we could do?
Yeah, some things that we'll potentially look at on Sunbury Meadows Drive would be some traffic calming features. For instance, what's called a curb bump out. So the current width of that pavement's about 36 feet from face of curb to face of curb. And, the reason that exists at that width is to allow on-street parking on both sides and then still maintain through lanes so that you're not into a stop-start situation there with traffic. So trying to identify that parking area, what we could do is have some curb bump outs there with some landscaping. That's a traffic calming feature that would slow traffic down and better define that on-street parking. There are other means and methods there to look at traffic calming. So that's part of the review study that's going to occur. I think that was what we discussed here recently at the service committee, was the traffic calming view for Sunbury Parkway.
And that review study, if I'm not mistaken, is that going to include an impact study as well?
We would do an impact study for the regional area, including around Kroger, Granville Street, Sunbury Meadows Drive, from the square to 3, Bird Drive. So that entire area.
Okay. That's all I have for now.
Any other comments for staff at this point? Mr. Bream, how do you want us to go about a discussion?
Usually you allow the applicant to respond to the public comment. You want to allow the applicant time.
Sure.
And there can also be questions of the applicant at some point. This is could set a record for a public hearing, but that's normally how it's done. Applicant speaks, public speaks, applicant has a chance to address the comments of the public, and there could be questions to the applicant.
Would the applicant like to answer any questions, provide any context related to the public comment? Thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Sure. Just a few things. First of all, I want to thank the public for their comment. This is a process. We appreciate and respect your time with us tonight and the comments you've brought forth. Just a few things of note. One gentleman, I think his name's Harpspin, or I didn't quite catch the name. He raised an issue about traffic, and I think that Mr. Hall addressed that briefly just now. in terms of some traffic work being done by the city. The short answer to his question about some sort of signalization at West Granville and Sunbury Meadows Drive, and he is much more capable than am I to address that comment. I will tell you that generally, to my understanding, is based on traffic warrants, which comes from the study, which it sounds like is part of the process the city's going through right now. Some comments about the apartments and their impact, and I'm sure there would be disagreement by those in the audience, but I can tell you that statistically, I am supporting this approach, which is 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. And in the case of this development, it's pretty close to 50-50 split between 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. That size of apartment does not generate significant students for schools, given the fact that there are not very many bedroom units and also the price point of these apartments. That is to say, someone looking to have their children come to Big Walnut schools to be educated, there are much more cost-effective places to live in and around the school district if that's their desire. But the statistics would support me that mix of apartments does not generate many students for schools. I'd also note that this project is not designed for school-age children. You see no playgrounds or play areas or those sorts of things that would be inviting to families. Additionally, with respect to apartments, and Mr. Shelby touched on this briefly, apartments are taxed like commercial property. So even though they're residential dwelling places, they're considered commercial property. So they are taxed at a higher rate than single family homes or condominiums are taxed, which means that they're going to generate a higher tax rate for the school district and overall higher taxes paid to the school district than a comparable development of, say, 120 homes. That's just facts based upon the way taxes work in Ohio. And then lastly, with all due respect to the woman, I think her name was Aarons, we disagree with her with respect to what the City of Sunbury, or at the time Village of Sunbury Comprehensive Plan says, and you'll see on pages 1 and 2 of our development text in your booklets at page 2, or excuse me, at tab 2, where we go through that. We think there are some very clear statements in your comprehensive plan about the citizens' desire for the growth and sustainability of Sunbury that both Sub-Area A and Sub-Area B support. And once again, just a difference of opinion from her, but if you take a look at our commentary in that regard about the comprehensive plan, I think you'll see that indeed we do fall well within many of the parameters of the comprehensive plan. With that, I have nothing else to add unless Gary Smith, do you have anything you'd want to add?
Yeah, just maybe 1 or 2 things. I think David did a really good job on some of the issues. One of the things we also heard tonight was a question about who are the people that are going to live here? Who is going to be attracted to this? It's essentially the kind of people that are in the missing middle. A lot of us have experienced the issue of, we have kids, they're raised in this community, they go to school in this community, they may go to college, they may want to come back to this community, but they're not ready to buy a home. Well, where do they go? The city needs a diversity of living opportunities. And increasingly, those younger professionals are looking for opportunities to rent. They may not be married yet. They may be married and just starting a life, but they're not ready to settle down in a single family. They don't have kids. If they have kids, they may have a baby and not ready to get into the school district yet. But they're also increasingly looking for walkable opportunities that are in close proximity to a lot of different amenities and services, kind of like the downtown. And interestingly enough, in our last meeting with the Planning Commission, one of the residents made a comment of, well, where are they going to go? The real estate office? Well, that's kind of the point. If you want to have a vibrant downtown, just look at the downtown right now. Tonight when I came in, an hour before the meeting started, the entire area around was filled. The parking spaces were filled. And so that tells me that you've got some things going on downtown, but at the same time, how are you going to get more people downtown? You really need to have people downtown that are within walking proximity. You need people who can walk out of their apartments, walk to the commercial that Mr. Donnell mentioned that he's going to develop to help sustain that and make it more successful, to walk to the firehouse or the new restaurant over here on the corner. Those are the kind of people that you want. Somebody mentioned those people having additional income. The concern really was that they're just going to buy drugs with that income. Our experience is a little different. Our experience is that they spend that money on entertainment, on doing things, going out to dinner, getting together with their friends, those kind of things. So those are really the kind of people that you want within walking distance of downtown. So that's really, I guess, my take on ultimately the kind of people that are going to be living in that apartment and why it may ultimately be desirable for the city of Sunbury.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher, any other comments, questions?
Not this time, Mayor. Thank you.
Right, council members, questions, answers for staff or residents?
A couple more comments or questions. So I want to get a little more clarity on the impact of the schools and number of students. So I have this study here I've seen recently. It's from the Delaware County Regional Planning Commission. Perhaps we want to enter this as an exhibit.
If you're speaking to a document, we should mark it as an exhibit.
And just looking over this today, I'm trying to get some clarity on it, but this was done in 2014 and 15, and it looks like selected multifamily developments, there's 12 in the county that were analyzed. And best I can tell, the impact for multifamily per unit is 0.147 students per unit. So extrapolating that to this development's 120 units, I'm seeing here the impact is about 17 to 18 students based on this evaluation. Is that what you think, Mr. Smith or Mr. Fisher, will be the impact? Is that what you're calculating?
And I'd like to, let me mark that. We started to mark it and then we didn't mark it. So we're going to mark this as Exhibit J for identification purposes.
Are you ready for us to proceed?
Yes, yes, please.
My response is that, first of all, I've not reviewed that study. I do know within the county and primarily over in Liberty Township, there are some earlier developments that are much more child-focused in terms of the amenity packages with playgrounds and such, and have more 3-bedroom units. 3-bedroom units definitely attract children and definitely attract families. So, Mr. Ghost, I think that 0.147 impact is probably on the high side. I agree. My math agrees with yours that would be, I think 18 children would be coming out of this project to attend schools by my math. I would suggest that is probably high for this development, with half of it being 1-bedroom units and half of it being 2-bedroom units.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I think you looked at this a little bit too. Can you add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll just add that based on some of the feedback at the last zoning commission public hearing, we reached out to the schools. We put in a FOIA request, which is a formal request for information. We were able to get obfuscated data from the school that was broken down by every single address, every grade, the age of every child. We took that, we matched it up against the county auditor site to do a compare and contrast. We then compiled that information into more or less a neighborhood view versus a street view. And the statistics, I'll just give you a couple. For example, the Lifestyles Community 150 unit apartment complex has 13 children.
In the schools?
In the schools, correct. For comparison, Avena Court has 19 children with 15 homes. The Retreats at Sunbury has 8 children for 72 homes. The most impactful development, the top 2 are both Sunbury Meadows and the communities at Sunbury. But when we look at this particular development, I guess from my perspective, and I'll share a little bit, is this isn't necessarily a mathematical exercise for me. Just because it pans out or is less impactful on the schools than the communities or Sunbury Meadows or my neighborhood, Sunbury Mills, doesn't mean that I'm like, you know what, let's just build apartments and put a moratorium on single family homes. There's a lot of intangible benefits to having a diverse population of housing and options. And I've personally toured the Westerville site. And what I found was a lady, right when this Councilwoman Cooper and I walked in, was moving out. She'd been there for 6 years. She was an 89-year-old woman and said she didn't want to leave, but her health was deteriorating. She had a first floor flat with an attached garage and paid, I think, $1,850 a month every month for the past 6 years. The demographic that we saw in the Westerville site, and I agree with some of the arguments. You know, we are not Westerville. We are not aspiring to be Westerville, but it's the closest actual data set that we have. So, I mean, just taking it in scope of all of the other data points, you know, the demographic is 22 to 27. That's probably the smaller population. Very few 30-year-olds, very few 40-year-olds. You start getting into the 50-year-olds and there's divorcees, there's folks that, you know, their spouses passed away. And the majority of the demographic that we met with was, you know, the 55, 60, 70. In the case of the lady we talked to for the longest time was 89 years old. So this isn't not an age restricted product, but I felt like it was important to share that. I heard a lot of comments about the school. I also agree that we have issues in the schools. I also agree, me being on Planning and Zoning Commission, I'll take ownership of, you know, being the new guy and trying to figure out how to connect the roadway network and what size right of way and all that. I mean, I've driven through Sunbury Meadows, and I agree there is a traffic issue. And I'll say, especially with the orientation of the homes where the driveways are facing on Sunbury Meadows, I do believe that is a concern. One that between the last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting and this meeting, City Council and our staff are taking very seriously. And I don't think that necessarily we're tying the two together. I think there's obviously going to be an additional impact if this proposal were to go through, but we need to look at more broad solutions related to traffic safety on Sunbury Meadows Drive. I'll pause there. There's several other comments I'm sure our council has.
I had another question with regard to the buffering there to the south. I'm sorry.
Your names, you can't see who you are.
Tim Gose, Gose. So the buffering to the south there, Mr. Smith, can you explain a little bit further? I was out there a few days ago, looked around, took some pictures, and I see that there's already an existing 6 to 8 foot mound there to the rear of some of these residences, it looks like to me, with some trees planted. Is your buffer going to be then to the north of that, on top of that? A little confused. And then secondarily on the fence, you said a 6 foot privacy fence. What kind of material? Is that going to be wood, brown in color, or what will that look like?
I think Gary Smith again, we're on in regards to the fence and the final details of the fence. I think we're open to that. I think ultimately the primary consideration was to get a privacy fence in there that would provide some immediate buffering as the plant material got installed and grew up. So whether that is a tan fence, a white fence, a vinyl fence, whether it has a lattice top or dog-eared, those are details that I think we're happy to have discussion on. We don't really have a preference one way or the other. I think we're happy to hear people's opinions and what they would like to see, behind their home. obviously, from what we've heard already. From the landscape perspective, everything, some of it's a little bit hard to tell. I would imagine that most of the trees that exist today are probably pretty close to right on the boundary. I would imagine that as the folks along Common Bennett, as those houses were developed, there was probably some destruction to those trees in the back that were maybe a little further in to allow utilities and everything else to get in there in those rear yards. And so usually the trees that are left are kind of the trees on the boundary. Our intent is to preserve those trees and work from the property line in on our side. And so I'm not really sure, Tim, where the mound is in relationship to that. I would have to take a closer look at the grading. If we can tie into that mound and expand on it, we will, if it's on the property line. If it's not in our property, then we're going to have an additional mound. And so the idea is, we're really going to start at the property line and, we're going to slope up and we're going to try to get, 4.5 feet in a mound, which is, somewhere around here. And then, imagine putting a 6-foot fence in the center of that, on top of that. So we're talking about, immediately day one, kind of a 10-foot screen. Then on both sides of that, we're going to come back in because that mound is going to be in the middle of that 25 feet. So we'll have 12.5 feet on either side to be able to plant evergreens, ornamental trees, all the things that I discussed previously. And the request of us was really to provide that plant material on both sides of the fence. Because a lot of times when you see screening, it's just kind of a fence, and then on our side, we put some plant material and we soften it. The idea being that the adjacent residents get benefit of the plant material as well, so that they're just not standing in a stark fence. So really, the idea is to try and filter, that buffer as much as we can. Does that answer your question in a long-winded?
Yes, and are those trees minimum 2.5-inch caliper, the deciduous and the ornamentals?
Yeah, typically, so that like the shade trees, they're going to be right around 2.5-inch caliper. That's about where they're most plentiful from a nursery standpoint.
It's about 15 feet typically, isn't it?
And typically about that. The ornamental trees will be a little shorter, but probably similar in caliper. But those trees always stay a little shorter because they are, again, more ornamental in nature. The focus for those trees is fall color, spring flower, just a variety of different look other than just solid evergreen. The evergreen trees are going to be probably between 6 and 7 feet in installation. And they don't really come in caliper. They're typically measured in height of installation.
Thank you. I'm wondering if a Common Bennett resident might be willing to expound on the existing mound that I know I saw back there. Looked pretty significant.
Well, now you're speaking.
You mind coming to the microphone and state your name, please? Thank you.
Larry Mead, MEADE, 2432 Common Bennett Drive.
Thank you.
The mountain you're speaking of is further down the way. Yes, it's very steep. My residence is more toward the east side, which basically there is none. And part of that, there is a drainage system that runs along at the bottom of that mound all the way down. So
yeah, it was more toward the middle.
Yeah, and that's a concern. And so as I mentioned before, as I look out of my house or on my patio, 10, 12, 15 feet really doesn't do me any good because the buildings are 35 feet high. So really, I'm actually seeing the top of the building, which in the drawing, it's the carriage one, which is the garage is at the bottom. So I've got residents at the top basically peering over, looking in my backyard or through my windows. I have 3 large windows across the back. So I don't hear a lot of discussion about that. And as the road comes in there, the lights, unless they fix that somehow, the lights from the cars will shine right in the first 3 houses that are along that curve area there.
We're just getting started on the comments if we haven't addressed it yet.
So
We're gonna be here till about 2 or 3 in the morning.
I bought the house 4.5 years ago. I knew it was industrial. I was okay with that.
Yeah.
But again, no, I don't hear anybody talking about why does it have to be apartments? And all I keep hearing is because the tax base, it makes more money for this or that and the other. But I heard 19 residents say that's not what we want. So as I mentioned before, I'm just looking for a win-win.
Right.
The other way, it's just like it's a win-lose, because if we don't get some type of compromise, Romanelli gets what he wants, maybe the council gets what they want, residents, so.
Yeah, so maybe we can talk about some of the alternatives. I was trying to avoid this so it wouldn't seem threatening. One moment, please. I have to, please, one moment, please, 1 moment. Yes, please. All right, so I have a question on the train of thought of, this is currently zone planned industrial. It's proposed to be zone planned commercial district, which includes multifamily and the commercial development on the front end. A two-part question. One is this connected? In other words, if the multifamily doesn't happen, then the commercial doesn't happen. And then the second one, if this gets rejected, what are the uses for planned industrial? Because I know Vince isn't going to sit on this.
David Fisher. With respect to your first question, I want to make sure that I understand it. Is your question that can sub-area B be rezoned to the commercial retail restaurant use without sub-area B? Is that your question?
Yeah, a lot of the residents had asked the question, or posed the statement, I like sub-area A. I do not like sub-area B. I heard the initial public speaker who was representing the commercial developer saying this would be good for commercial. I didn't hear him say, I'm not going to do it if the multifamily is rejected. And since this is a combined proposal, is there the way to detach the two? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here, because I feel like some folks are drawing in their mind what they want. And we have a property owner who controls it now and is asking, for it to be rezoned for his purposes right now.
So first of all, what you also heard Mr. Donnell say was how, in addition to his desire for this rezone for sub-area B or sub-area A, I believe he also said in his presentation that he feels strongly he needs sub-area B and the density of the residents living there for sub-area A to work. Now, with that said, this is a zoning application pending right now for the entire area. Should Mr. Donnell desire to do so, if this zoning does not go through, he absolutely could file for a rezone for just sub-area A and start over in the process. But this zoning, as it's currently situated, from its very beginning, included all the property, all your zoning notices and everything else. So he would have to start over to just zone sub-area A to a commercial, retail, and restaurant use.
So Donnell, do you want to speak to that as well?
Sure. Dana Donnell. I am a resident of Sunbury also. Moved here in 1996. I think when I think about the project, I get a little bit concerned about I think my desire in the project is to create a traffic pattern, from the residential area, and as David has proposed, the apartment residential area, down the sidewalks, enjoy the benefits of the commercial development, and also on the way into a parade, the things that are, the amenities that are already in place in the square. I'm a little concerned about if it maintains an industrial zoning, that you're moving people from a residential environment through an industrial zone into enjoy the amenities of the downtown or of our development. And I don't know, it just doesn't feel right to me, but those are my thoughts. Were there any other questions?
Yeah, that's all. I have a question for legal counsel around what the permitted uses are within planned industrial district.
This is David Bream, Law Director. I will pull the code. Because there is a difference between industrial and planned industrial. Industrial is Kentner Parkway. This is planned industrial, that's different. Anthony Dental is planned industrial. Post office is planned industrial. UDF is planned, or UDF, that's a long way back. Yeah, UDF is planned industrial. But I can get the uses for you.
I'm just gonna rattle off some additional ones. Barry Bennett's building, Taekwondo, Big Walnut Apparel, On3, the old Midwest Cheer location, the carpet store. I'm looking at a pink and green map, so I'm just going based off memory. The car wash, Ohashi, if I didn't say that already.
In planned industrial district, you have to submit a development plan. Within the planned industrial district, the following uses developed in strict compliance with the approved development plan and standards shall be permitted: manufacturing, processing, warehousing, and industrial service activities located and maintained within the limits of the development standards of these planned industrial district regulations. Commercial establishments normally associated with and designed to serve the industrial establishments or their employees and approved as part of the development plan, such as financial institutions, restaurants, gasoline service stations, automobile repair establishments, recreation or other personal enrichment facilities, provided such establishments or facilities are established primarily for the employees or of industrial establishments or in conjunction with commercially operated recreational establishments developed as a part of the approved plan for the planned industrial district.
What were you referencing there? So in case the stenographer didn't catch on that.
This is the section S81.15.13 of the Sunbury zoning code, planned industrial district.
Everybody got all those uses?
That included Tim goes auto repair body shops as well, I believe. Is that right, Mr.
I
Green?
think it's a automobile repair establishments. I don't see body shops, but it does say automobile. repair
Warehousing, is that right? What else do we hear?
Yeah, it says manufacturing, processing, warehousing, and industrial service activities located and maintained within the limits of the development standards of these planned industrial district regulations. A planned district, you have to develop a plan, you have to submit it. You don't have to say what you want to do, but there has to be a plan around it for lighting, for traffic, for parking, for everything. So, that's what this district is about. They're looking to rezone it to planned commercial, which is a different plan, and they also have to have a plan, and that's where they're submitting in accordance with this plan as well. But the planned industrial district would have to have a plan for any of these uses. They're permitted, but we would have to talk about how we want to do it, not just that we want to do it. That's different than straight industrial zoning. That's different, than everything that's in the Kinder Parkway. That's straight industrial. Different zoning.
There was a resident that wanted to speak there.
Eric Williamson again. I just wanted to clarify for Mr. Goss, our property does have that mountain behind it. And the property line is just beyond that. So it would be two separate mountains. And the utilities were not put back there. All the utilities are in the front of the house. So we didn't lose any trees when they built.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mr.
Usually at this point, we open up for questions of the public to the applicant. They address those questions and usually you conclude the public hearing. This will go into session. This is a public hearing, but it's not the end of the process. You still have a piece of legislation that, unless you suspend rules, takes 3 readings. And there can be discussion at each of those meetings prior to the reading. So this isn't the end of the road for discussion. But eventually, usually the public hearings, once there's the ability for both sides to speak, questions to the applicant, the ability to respond to those questions, the public hearing is concluded.
Okay. All right, so I think you're recommending we close the public hearing? You're saying that's an option?
No, I'm just saying, we're pushing 10 o'clock.
Yes.
And if we can sit here all night and come up with something else to say and something else to say, and I don't want to diminish anybody's right to say something, but the same token, these hearings have to come to an end at some point. It does not the end of your opportunity to come and speak to this body. So.
Murray, did you make a motion to close the public hearing?
Make that motion.
All right, we got a motion by Murray Neff. Second by John Grumney. Discussion. Roll call.
Murray Neff,
Yes.
John Grumney,
Yes.
Dan Capel,
Yes.
Cindy Ghost,
Yes.
Joe St. John,
Yes.
Cindy Cooper. Yes. David Martin,
Yes.
7-8.
All right. We got 20 or 30 more items on the agenda to cover.
Our meeting will now start.
All right, we had a meeting on October 19th in 2022. Seems a while ago. There are minutes to be approved.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Dave Martin, second by Cindy Cooper. Discussion. Roll call.
David Martin,
Yes.
Cindy Cooper.
Yes.
John Grumney,
Yes.
Murray Neff,
Yes.
Joe St. John,
Yes.
Tim Ghost,
Yes.
Damon Capel,
Yes.
7-8.
All right, we're on to the visitors section of the meeting. Is there any visitors out there that would like to speak about anything in the community? Now's the time to do that.
Anyone? What was the question?
If any visitors wanted to speak.
I would like to speak.
Okay, come on in.
Again, my name's Doug Lindenberg. I live on 70 Rainbow Avenue. I'm inquiring about the information I gave to the assistant administrator on Friday concerning a safety issue on Greenbrier. And it's basically a gentleman's taken basically a 4-inch gutter drain off his house or off somebody's house. And it's put it up against the easement of the roadway. It's not safe. It's a safety issue. The engineering is what I would say spot on for someone that would like to put a drain on the back of their house. If they had pigs or cows or something, they're trying to leak something away from their house. A 4-inch gutter installed. The top of the gutter is installed at ground level, right up against the asphalt. Is concrete on both sides. If somebody walks, if somebody rides a bike, a motorcycle, might be riding up on that side of the road and hits that, we're talking white. It's a 25-mile-an-hour zone. That type of a drain system, which I think is very unique, it serves its purpose. It's not safe. It's not DOT, Department of Transportation, Ohio. It's not being approved, as we would call it, in the industry. I have not been called. I've left my number.
Maybe you will have
by Mr. Hennessy.
There he is, right there.
What's that?
Do you want Mr. Hennessy's back there? You want to take a sidebar and address the concern?
Are you aware of it? We're aware of it, right?
Yeah, the issue you raised with me.
Yeah.
We are aware, yes.
Okay, has anything been done with it? I guess.
It hasn't been resolved.
Conversation.
It hasn't been resolved. This is an issue regarding.
You need to speak into a microphone, Mr. Hennessy.
Let me go ahead and explain.
Well, I'm saying that it's like a 25-foot section of gutter, and the gentleman's taken quite a bit of he's taken quite a bit of labor to do it, which I say is if it were in my backyard and I need to get water away from something, that would be on my property, but it's right up against the easement of the road, and you would have you'd have to look at it and just gander at it for a minute, and then you'd smirk. And then you would say, we got to take care of this.
I think for the majority of council members, this is probably the first we're hearing about it. What I can tell you is Daryl Hennessy is going to follow up with you.
I brought it up before, the city, or not so much the city manager or the administrator. I brought it up to the assistant manager or administrator. I've also just in talk, because I ride my bike every day. I've talked to Mr. Gerwin also. Is it Brad?
Yes.
I talked with him. He said, yeah, we're aware of it. And I've waited about 4 weeks. And I brought this up Friday. Now it's Wednesday. I brought it up last Friday. Now it's Wednesday, the 2nd of November.
I promise you we are going to take care of it. I'm going to have to move the meeting along. I promise you we are going to take care of it. I hate to hold up this meeting. It sounds like we've got some work to do internally on following up more promptly and delivering the response back to you. I don't have enough facts right now to publicly reprimand anyone, so we're not going to do that. We're going to move the meeting along. I apologize. I'm sorry, we have to move on. I'm sorry, we have to move.
I apologize.
I apologize. I don't want to, I do not want to force this issue. I'm sweating right now. I want to move. All right, any other visitors in the audience? Thank you for being extremely courteous with our public participation. And we're going to follow up on that, Steve, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Got a big yellow highlight around it.
All right, no more visitors. We're on to committee reports. Parks?
Yes, sir. In the spirit of brevity, we will keep it short. So earlier tonight, we had the Park and Rec meeting at 5:30. We had 3 main items to discuss. The MORPSI report came in. Mr. Jordan Petroff was here to give us that presentation. He talked about, they gave us an overview of their report on the pedestrian and bike system and how we can improve it, steps moving forward, so on and so forth. We're going to digest that and look at the next steps in our next meeting. Second item was J.R. Smith Park. Talked to Mr. Hall. He gave us some good updated conceptual plans on that. Next step actually is actually going to have an open house for everyone out there. You're all invited. It'll be hopefully it'll be sometime in January or February. And contrary to rumor out there, we still own the park and nobody's selling it or has any plans to sell it that I know of. We're actually in the process of trying to improve it. And part of that process is having an open house and inviting you folks to give us some feedback. So that'll probably happen sometime in January or February. Third item was a reservoir park. We're now ready to go out to bid for getting the fishing pier and any dock out there and some restrooms and the handicap walkway, I should say, path up to the top of the reservoir. And we are going to have benches and some trash receptacles there and a dog station. So that's just phase 1 for the reservoir. And the last item was this GR tree work, the invasive trees. That's been done by Mr. Noblet. As far as I know, he's done a pretty good job. That's it.
Just for those who are still in the audience, this is normally like the tone and tenor of the meeting, this type of stuff. Please come back next week or the following week. Anything, Mr. Grumney?
No, I do not.
All right, Mr. Capel?
Nothing here.
I'll update on services. We talked a lot about street safety programming. A lot of the impacts on Granville, Cherry, both short tactical things that we can do and also long-range planning and infrastructure improvements. Ms. Cooper?
Yep, we had a zoning meeting on October 24th where we discussed Kittner Crossing. This is maybe the second time they've come for reference. This plot of land is east of Domigan, north of Cheshire, southwest of 3637. There's 2 parcels. They're looking to put in patio homes, 81 patio homes and 107 townhomes to be owned, not rented. It didn't go to a vote. We're still working with them and we expect that they'll come back to zoning.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. No.
Nothing to report.
All right, we do have a police report. I told the chief I would just read it in the abundance of saving time. Gotta find it. Somebody give me a page number.
Third full page, 15, 16.
16? Thank you. Trick or treat was excellent this year. I did see a lot of police officers out handing out candy. Thank you so much. The new cruiser, just a quick update on that, 2022, 2023 cruisers are coming in. They have just over 300 cruisers on order, and as of last week, they have just received over 40 vehicles. They cannot give us a probable delivery date. They would only say that we are hopeful we will see ours by year end. I think we actually appropriated this last year and again this year, if I'm not mistaken. On training, all of our officers attended firearms training as well as qualifications. All patrol officers, full-time as well as part-time, along with court staff, all attended this training. All commissioned officers are also required to do 24 hours of continuous education training, and they are all working on that as well. Officer Whiteside attended and passed his SRO, that's School Resource Officer Basic course. Regarding the collective bargaining, the final draft has been sent to our attorney and it says if approved, but will be approved by the mayor, attorney, and FOP, and the contract will go then to the members to be voted on. After the members vote on it, it will come to council for their approval. Breakdown of calls for service. That's it. We are on. Any questions for the police on record?
No.
All right. We're on to the administrator report, Mr. Piles.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll be even briefer, I think. Report was provided in your packet and online. I'm going to mention that I went to a virtual meeting for our demo grant. It's been formally approved. The one house cleared a historical review that was pending, and tonight you have some legislation about a subrecipient agreement to get that thing rolling at full speed ahead. And leaf pickup continues. Letts Avenue point repairs have been made, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Piles? Anybody want to give him a layup? Nothing. All right. Engineers report.
Thank you, Mayor. Everything is updated in the report. I will just mention that the Fallen Heroes Multi-Use Trail Phase 3 were completed. We'll be advertising that project for bidding shortly. And the wastewater treatment plant upgrade is in full swing on the design side. We've had a couple meetings with Mr. Compton to review more of the influent process part of that project. So that is moving along nicely. And I will take any questions.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Paul? All right, we're on to resolutions. Resolution number 2022.09, resolution authorizing the execution of an addendum to the subrecipient agreement with the Delaware County Land Reutilization Corporation. I believe this is tied to the demo grant.
Yeah, this is required to get the demo grant, and we do we need this tonight, Steve?
If we could, while the Department of Development has kind of delayed us some, they've held firm to a May 1st. You got to have the project done date. So if you could pass it tonight, that would be very helpful.
Grant amount.
108 and some change.
That's great.
$108,000. So it's a resolution. We don't need an emergency, but we need the suspension of the rules and a motion to vote on the resolution itself.
Motion to suspend the rule.
A motion by Dave Martin, second the rules, second by Murray Neff. Discussion, roll call.
David Martin,
Yes.
Murray Neff,
Yes.
Cindy Cooper. Yes. John Grumney.
Yes.
Joe St. John.
Yes.
Tim Goes.
Yes.
Damon Capps.
Yes.
7 yeas.
All right, we're on to ordinances.
Motion on resolution 2022.09. Second.
Got a motion by Dave Martin, second by Murray Neff. Discussion. Roll call, you're getting me.
David Martin,
Yes.
Murray Neff,
Yes.
Cindy Cooper. Yes. John Grumney.
Yes.
Joe St. John.
Yes.
Tim Goes.
Yes.
Damon Capps.
Yes.
7 yeas.
I apologize for interrupting the mayor.
Please, I deserved it. All right, we're on to ordinances, third reading, ordinance number 2022.35, an ordinance providing for increased compensation for elected officials. Any discussion on this?
Motion to approve ordinance 2022.35.
Motion by Damon Capple, second by Murray Neff. Discussion. Roll call.
Damon Capps.
Yes.
Murray Neff.
Yes.
Tim Goes.
Yes.
Joe St. John.
Yes.
John Governor. Cindy Cooper. Yes. David Martin.
Yes.
7 yeas.
All right, we're on to second readings, which we have none. First readings, ordinance number 2022.44. An ordinance approving the application of Romanelli Sunbury Group LLC and NPA Commercial Property LLC to rezone approximately 13.22 plus or minus acres on property along the south side of West Granville Street and bifurcated by Sunbury Meadows Drive from Planned Industrial District, Planned Commercial District pursuant to the City of Sunbury zoning code. We want to have any discussion on this at this point?
You had quite a bit of discussion tonight.
I need
This is
to-
the next start of the process. There is legislation that would be required to approve the zoning. This is a first reading on it tonight. The normal process for legislation is it gets 3 readings. There'll be 2 more and then a vote. Goes into effect 30 days after, unless there's emergency language. There's not emergency language in this ordinance. So that's the process. To the extent anybody wants to come and talk about this, it will be on your agenda at the next meeting. It will not be a public hearing format. You won't have to be sworn, but if you want to come and talk, you can also come to the next meeting.
I do want to say one thing. Since I have the ability to call recess, I have the ability to talk here. 1 second on this. It's important. There we go. First of all, I would recommend that all council persons go back, listen to this meeting. I took a lot of detailed notes, but I was also trying to stay engaged.
Yes.
I need to aggregate my comments. I think there's some common themes here. I think we'll send those out to the proposed applicant to get responses. I think we'll send some to staff. But I wanted to say a special thank you for folks that reached out proactively to me and other council members. I know we got several letters, also several phone calls, especially after the last Planning and Zoning Commission. And I wanted to say a special thank you to 5 residents that I met with. And that was Julie Ahrens, who spoke here tonight, Dan, her husband, Manoush, who spoke at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, Adrian, and I believe it was Shri, met with me in person. And it was a really good discussion. And I think we both learned a lot. I also want to say thanks to Vince Romanelli for setting up a meeting where Cindy Cooper and I could go down and tour the facility. I think he would do that for any one of you. I would encourage the residents to go and do that. Meet with the property manager and go and scope it out like you were going to move in there. Just, if you want to go incognito and figure out what kind of place this is. And if you think it belongs or not, it doesn't belong in Sunbury. That's all I have to say. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Fisher, for attending remotely. Hope you feel better. Thank you, Mr. Olin. Thank you, Mr. Smith, for being here. See you in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
All right, we're on to ordinance number 2023.01. An ordinance to approve expenses and other expenditures of the city of Sunbury, Delaware County, state of Ohio during the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2023 and ending December 31st, 2023. This looks like a first reading that can pause, and we probably just need to have it passed by the end of November.
Yeah, this is the annual appropriations first reading. Dana's here. I would like to give her just a few minutes to explain the numbers because I don't have my glasses with me tonight. I can't read these numbers.
Thank you. This is the first reading of the ordinance for the budget for fiscal year 2023. Just briefly, I'll go through the overview sheet, which is the very first page on your exhibits. We have every fund lined up on the left-hand side with the anticipated revenues, total available resources, appropriations, and a projected balance at the end of 2023 based on all of the appropriations. On the following pages, you have the details in category form for each of those. There will be a few minor adjustments, well, one or two at the most that I'm aware of currently that will be updated for the next reading. They are very minor, nothing more than a few $1,000s.
Okay.
Any questions?
Thank you very much.
This goes to full 3 readings by statute, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dana.
All right, we're on to new and unfinished business. We're going to go rapid fire. Mr. Murray, no.
Nothing to report.
All right. Mr. Martin.
Good meeting tonight.
Super.
Nothing to make.
6 days until the election. Mr. Capel.
Nothing here.
Mr. Grubby?
Thank
Mr.
you.
Ghost?
Nothing further.
All right, we're looking for a motion and a vote on Freedom Park Farm Rent. This is an extension of the contract with Gary W. Stinger, ordinance number 2022.04, basically saying, Mr. Gary
We did
Stinger.
publicly bid, we were required to publicly bid the lease of our farm ground out by Freedom Park. It's on the north side. It's some acreage that we really don't use. It's been farmed historically ever since we've owned that part of it. It's our option to offer it to him again. Kathy did reach out to him. He's willing to farm it next year. We have no planned use for it within the next calendar year. So we need a motion and a vote to approve it being, that option being exercised by us, with his agreement to go ahead and farm it next year.
Make a motion.
Second.
Second by John Grumney. Discussion. Roll call.
Joe St. John.
Yes.
John Brumney.
Yes.
David Martin.
Yes.
Cindy Cooper.
Yes.
Murray Neff.
Yes.
Tim Ghost.
Yes.
Damon Capel.
Yes.
7 yeas.
Do have need to enter executive session, but before we do, I think we need to potentially include a few folks. Yes. So we need Mr. Breen, probably Mr. Piles, Mr. Hennessy. I believe that will be all. All right, so I'd like to make the motion to enter executive session per Ohio Revised Code section 121.22 G2 to consider the purchase of property for public purposes, the sale of property, a competitive bidding, or the sale of other disposition of unneeded, obsolete, or unfit for use property in accordance with section 505.10 of the revised code. If premature disclosure of information would give an unfair, competitive, or bargaining advantage to a person whose personal private interest is adverse to the general public interest. Can I get a second? Second. Discussion. Roll call.
Joe St. John.
Yes.
David Martin.
Yes.
Cindy Cooper.
Yes.
John Brumney.
Yes.
Murray Neff.
Yes.
Tim Ghost.
Yes.
Damon Capel.
Yes.
7 yeas.
All right, so we're in executive session. Do we need a very brief recess or no?